There are basically two categories of people in the world today. Number one, those who are obedient to God the Father by submitting themselves to Jesus Christ. It's what we call those who are converted and who have God's Holy Spirit. Then there is a second classification, those who are disobedient to God the Father and Jesus Christ. Therefore, they are literally without God in the world. They are on their own. They have to put up with their own problems, their own day-to-day lives without the intervention of God the Father and Jesus Christ. And in 1 John chapter 3, verse 7 and 8, it reads like this: "Little children, let no man deceive you." So we're to have a childlike mind in our approach to God. "He that does righteousness is righteous." That's those who have been converted to Jesus Christ. They've repented of all their sins. They're now obeying His law. Verse 8, "He that commits sin is of the devil, for the devil sins from the beginning." Now notice this second classification. Those who are of the devil are those who commit sin. They break God's law because 1 John 3 verse 4 says sin is the transgression of the law. This category of people literally break God's law and come under the influence of Satan the devil through ignorance. They don't mean to. They don't know it. They don't comprehend that there is a struggle between good and evil in the world today. And by default, by not obeying God, they automatically obey Satan the devil. They are of the devil, but not by choice. But there is a second group of people in the world today. This second group of individuals are literally Satan worshipers. They are literally devil worshipers. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, it says that in the garden with Adam and Eve was a serpent. And this serpent deceived Eve. And Eve then passed on her sin and talked Adam into committing sin. In Revelation 12 verse 9, it says very clearly that serpent was the great red dragon, and it was called Satan the devil. Revelation 20 verse 1 and 2 verifies that Satan the devil is the serpent that deceived Adam and Eve. Revelation chapter 12 verse 3 and 4 shows that this great red dragon was cast out, and he took 1/3 of the angels of God with him in rebellion. This means 1/3 of the angels are in direct competition and in rebellion to God the Father and Jesus Christ and everything that is good and wholesome and righteous. This second group of individuals that are Satan worshipers or Luciferians, they know exactly what they're doing. They're not just deceived. They willingly worship Satan the devil. His name at one time, and most in the higher echelon of Satanism today, actually call him Lucifer. In Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 to 14, it talks about a being. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12 to 14. "How are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How are you cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations?" So it's Lucifer that is undermining the nations. He is the one that is actually at fault in the world today. "For you've said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I'll exalt my throne above the stars. I'll also sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north," where God's throne is. His determination was to overthrow God the Father and make the universe His. Verse 14, "I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High." This is Lucifer, whose name was changed to Satan because of his activity that he's engaged in today. In Ezekiel chapter 28, Ezekiel 28, once again, it refers to this same individual. Verse 12 on, I'll just hit some of the highlights. This is referring to the son of Tyrus, or the king of Tyrus, and he is only the physical individual. He's really talking to an individual who has the power behind the throne. In the middle of the verse it says, "You seal up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You have been in Eden, the garden of God." This identifies the individual that is being talked about here is not the literal human being, king of Tyrus, but it is a spirit being who has lived through this entire expanse of time from the garden of God, the Garden of Eden, until this present time. There were only three individuals in the Garden of Eden: Adam, Eve, God, and then the serpent was the fourth individual. Since God was instructing Adam and Eve in the proper way to live, the fourth individual has already been identified as the serpent, or Satan, the devil. This means this is referring to Lucifer of Isaiah chapter 14, whose name was changed to Satan to describe his activity. Look in verse 13. It says, "You were in the garden of God." And in the very last statement, the two last words in verse 13, it says, "You were created." This was a created angelic being. Verse 14 says, "You are the anointed cherub that covers." It was an angelic being, a cherub, that covered the very throne of God. That is very high in the echelon of the angelic beings. He was perfect in everything that he did. Notice verse 15. "You were perfect in your ways from the day that you were created, till iniquity was found in you." This great angelic being was perfect in every way. To look upon in beauty, in wisdom, everything about him was perfect. There was no flaw that you could find in him until something happened one day. That happening was, over a period of time, he began to experience something that every human being experiences at one time or another in his lifetime: jealousy, lust, greed. And in Job chapter 1, verse 6 and 7, when an angelic host came to appear before God the Father, Satan was there, the adversary. Then, in chapter 2, once again it mentions that he was there at this heavenly conference. And in 1 Peter 5:8, it gives the description of what he's doing, walking up, down, through the earth, up and down in the earth, seeking who he can devour. Satan wants to devour individuals. But I've got a question. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 44 gives the good news of the kingdom of God. It states that the God of heaven, when there will be a world ruling government composed of 10 global groupings of nations, then the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. This is the good news. However, if God is yet to set up his kingdom, then who rules the world today? Does he have a real organized kingdom? Is there literally a government that rules this earth today, unseen to the natural mind and the natural taste buds, the thought processes of man? When Jesus was on trial for his life, let's turn to John 18 and read it. Jesus made a most graphic statement, because most people in the religious community today say that the kingdom of God is the church. Look what Jesus said. John 18, verse 36. Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world." The Greek word world is aeon, meaning age. It's not of this present order of things, this age. If my kingdom were of this age or this world, then would my servants fight. Jesus shows clearly that when He is going to establish His kingdom, His followers will fight to overthrow the existing governments. He says, that's why my servants aren't keeping me from being crucified and put to death, because it's not time for my kingdom yet. He said, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. So if Jesus' kingdom is not yet established, then who rules? Who rules the world today? Turn to Matthew chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. Jesus makes clear who's ruling the world today. Verse 1 and 2. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. Notice, here is Satan, the devil, the one who was known as Lucifer previously. And Albert Pike stated that those of the 33rd degree in Freemasonry, should maintain the pure doctrine of Lucifer, and let all of those of the lesser initiates of the Masonic Lodge, 32nd degree and down, call their God whatever they want, because those individuals are deliberately deceived anyway and do not understand that the Masonic religion is devil worship. Verse 2. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward a-hungered. Now notice, Jesus was at his weakest point of his life. The word hungered literally means craved. He was at the point of starvation, to the point where his body was actually, the cellular structure was cannibalizing itself. It was feeding upon the nutrients within the cells themselves, until the point would have come that he would have died from the lack of nutrients. This is how far along toward death he was. Then verse 8. Again, the devil takes him up into an exceeding high mountain and shows him all the kingdoms of the world and the glory of them. Notice, Satan showed Jesus the kingdoms of the world. And in verse 9, and Satan said unto Jesus, all these things will I, Satan the devil, give you if you will fall down and worship me. This is the individual who has power over the kingdoms today. This is the individual that has created a super organization that is right now ruling the world. And it will culminate with a world government at the very end of the age that most in Christianity call the Antichrist system. Now, in Satan's kingdom, there is a code of silence. You cannot breathe anything about Satanism, even to your fellow initiates into Satanism. Only when someone defects and runs for their life to save it, do they ever expose the very inner workings of Luciferian worship or Satanism or devil worship. Such a man that came out of witchcraft, he was a high priest in witchcraft, Satanism, was called Mike Warnke, Warnke. He revealed the tactics used by people on the inside to get others involved in the lower levels of witchcraft, Satanism, or demonism. There are various stages in witchcraft, and you don't even realize the one above you even exists unless you are chosen to go into that realm. The first stage, those in the occult send out scouts to high schools, colleges, local singles bars, and look for men and women with potential ability. They're on the ball, and yet they've had something in their life that sort of put them down, and they've lost confidence in themselves, and they're searching and looking for some meaning in their life. If they're not already on drugs, they'll introduce them to drugs. Once they're on the drugs, these new recruits, totally unaware of what's happening to them, are invited to parties. These are not just ordinary parties. These are literally sex orgies, where there are exactly the same number of females there as there are males. And the females are already recruited into Satanism, and they use their bodies to draw others into Satanism. After several hours at this party, they're taking drugs, they're getting high, they're dancing to acid rock music. They pair off. It was planned in advance. Satanists know how to entangle people through the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life. Every sexual deviant activity and behavior is performed upon these new recruits so that they'll come back again because of the lust of the flesh. They want to gratify every sensual part of the flesh. Then at these sex orgies, they select certain ones who have no morals and privately tell them that they have been handpicked to know more about their organization. They use their ego against them by saying that they are superior beings to the rest of those who have been invited to the parties. Those selected are then invited to go on to what is called the second level. This superior person is literally hand-selected to attend the second stage. At this particular meeting, no one exchanges names. You're just another person and a face sitting there, but no name is attached to it. They simply sit in a large circle. The outstanding feature of this second stage is cold, calculated blasphemy of God the Father and Jesus Christ. Everything that is biblical, they sit around in a circle and blaspheme against God and Jesus and against Christianity. By the time this particular session is over, and you may attend 4, 5, or even up to 20 of these sessions, and they're watching you at all times. They're evaluating whether you have literally given up any belief in God and Jesus Christ. Then it becomes clear they can reveal the real purpose. This is witchcraft, Satanism. It is global in scope, all over the world. This meeting is what they call a binding together meeting. There are several hundred of those individuals who met with Mr. Mike Warnke in the San Bernardino Valley of California, Southern California. They were brought in by the very same way that he was brought in. He was down on what they call your luck. He was looking for something. He had a big ego. He thought of himself very highly, thought he was the greatest there was, so they could play on his ego. And when they provided women for sex orgies, this brought him in a hurry. So it becomes clear by the time you've gone to several of these second stage meetings that you are willing to give up all of your morals. Those who then are asked or revealed that there is such a thing as a third stage, by this time are willing to totally submit to your superiors in this particular coven. Totally submit. Never ask a question. Whatever they tell you to do, you do it. Never questioning. When you have literally sold yourself out, your own thought processes, then you are invited to the third stage. This is when you literally join a local witchcraft coven. You become a member of it. At these covens, they sit in a circle. And now I want to quote from his book, that he wrote, I'll hold it up, is called The Satan Cellar. Exactly what they do in their coving meetings. Page 45. In the center of the circle was an altar, a granite slab supported on 2 sawhorses. On the slab, a girl lay on her back, nude and waiting, her skin glowing red in the light given off by the candles, and the bale fire burning in a crucible nearby. An inverted cross, because everything in Christianity are symbols that people claim come from Christianity, they defile it. They profane it. Here at one end of the slab where this nude woman was laying was an inverted cross, and an image of a goat's head stood at the other end of the altar. A goat's head, Mendes. Soon the remainder of the group took their places. This is around a big circle in which she was in the interior part on this nude woman on the slab. Dean and the other 2 high priests or counselors sat on the 3 sides of the altar facing the east. Always facing the east. Why is it that every Masonic lodge in the world always has the starburst in the east and those who are members facing the east? Every time. The service was a black mass. All the traditional rituals were reversed and deliberately profaned. The sacraments were desecrated. Blasphemies took the place of prayers. Words attributed to Satan were read from the book, The Great Mother, which Dean, this was the high priest at this time, now standing, held open, resting the book, the back of the book, on the girl's stomach. After the invocation of Satan, I listened intently to the offertory, where the members offered their souls to the Lord Satan. Then they were ready. They drew a pentagram on the girl's stomach. A pentagram is an upside-down, 5-pointed star with a circle around it. Then here's what he quoted. Quote, "Let those with grievances speak now, that we may all bind together at this hour to direct the power of our father Satan. As I will, so moot it be." So whatever they say, the demon that they're going to call up must perform it. Now notice what else he said. He joined the others, moving up to surround the petitioner. He said, "Does anyone have a grievance against someone else?" So when somebody held their hand up and said, "So-and-so did something to me," then everyone gathered around this individual. Notice what they did. We circled him, putting our hands on his body. A counterfeit laying on of hands in devil worship. And chanting the request to Satan in unison several times. Then notice what he says. "I felt it, the presence. I could almost make out the hazy outline of a demon spirit as it floated out of the pentagram." The pentagram was drawn on the nude woman's stomach that was laying on the altar of the devil. Then this demon went about its work, going off into the night to fulfill the request that they had made. And then notice what else. He said, "At the next full moon." They always had meetings at the full moon. Satan worship always takes place then. This man, after being in this coven for some period of time, had proven his unswerving loyalty to Satan. He had literally seen the pentagram and how it was drawn on the nude woman's stomach. They would then give direct instructions to these demons after they prayed to their Lord Satan, and Satan will give orders to a demon to do whatever they said. Now, on page 52, this man served Satan well. On the next new moon, he was to become initiated as the high priest in Satanism. I'll quote from page 52 of that book. He cleared his throat and continued, "Repeat after me." So now Mike Warnke was going to take the oath, the high priest oath of initiation. "I, known here as Judas, do hereby and now forever and a day." See, they always cover themselves. Forever and an extra day. "Submit my soul to the custody and care of his highest of darkness, Satan, master of the world." Then they picked up what is called the book. As he picked up the knife which had been dedicated earlier, he was instructed, this is Mike Warnke, to hold out his right wrist. I looked at the knife and then my wrist. What was this, I wondered? He found a place near an artery and made an incision. I jerked violently. They were drawing blood and sealing in blood his pledge to Satan, the devil. He says, "Now it's time. Now dip this quill in the blood and sign your new name." He literally had to sign his new name into a book that's preserved by the high priest of Satanism. And he went on to describe how that once in a while he would see on a page where a name had turned green rather than red ink. And he asked, "Well, what is this name green for?" And the high priest answered, "This person turned from Satan. He broke his vow, so he is dead." Anyone who goes into Satanism and tries to come out, it's at the risk of your life. What happened to Sharon Tate when the Manson killers took over? They were in Satanism, and Sharon Tate had a ritualistic murder. Then he went on and stated, those names who are in green are those who cocked out. Satan doesn't like to admit he's lost a soul. End of quote. So Satan does not want anyone to back out when they've gone into his system. Now, thus far, those in Satanism have used money, flashed it around, and used sex orgies in order to grab individuals unsuspecting and bringing them into Satanism. Then, if a person already was using dope, they would use power. They would hold out the potential of power and rulership in governmental posts and so on over their head to lure them into Satanism. After a period of time, when Mike Warnke was in the coven, and he had been much scrutinized by his superiors, the high priest and the counselors in this particular coven asked him to become high priest. He learned his rituals well. He had served Satan in every single thing they had asked him to do. His present high priest told Mike that he was going to be moved up, way up. Therefore, it would leave the high priesthood vacant, and everyone felt that he fit and should be the high priest. But what would this tell you automatically? If this present high priest was going to be moved way up, that means there are yet other stages to move into in witchcraft. And yet it's totally unknown to those in the coven except the high priest. And his two counselors, 3 individuals, knew the difference. So Mike began to realize this thing which is called witchcraft, Satanism, was really big. It was global. So Mike became high priest. He was told that whatever he wanted, he could have. Name it, and the Brotherhood would pay for it. Then he thought upon this name, the Brotherhood, and it sounded familiar to him. And I'll interject something that was not in his book that we've published in our magazine before. Remember, the Brotherhood of the Illuminati was founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. And yet this was nothing more than an update of the Illuminati that can be traced back as far as 1100 A.D. And this is Satanism, and they are the ones who laid down their final 200-year program for world capture. Take over the world for world government. There was another man who was in socialism. His name was George Orwell. He wrote 2 books, one of them called Animal Farm, the other 1984. 1984 was required reading by all freshmen starting in 1959 in college. I had it as required reading. In the book Animal Farm, one of his characters by the name of O'Brien made this statement, I quote, "I can tell you that the Brotherhood exists, but I cannot tell you whether it numbers 100 members or 10 million. You'll have heard rumors of the existence of the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood cannot be wiped out because it's not an organization in the ordinary sense." End of quote. So this man in socialism, working for world government and the destabilization of all governments to overthrow them for a one-world society, came upon the fact that the Brotherhood indeed exists. Sir Winston Churchill ran head-on with the Brotherhood. He wrote an essay on Leon Trotsky, and it was recorded in a book called Great Contemporary. On page 168 and 169, I'll quote his statement concerning the Brotherhood. Quote, "The citadel of freedom will be stormed under the banners of liberty and democracy." Isn't that what we hear everywhere today? How great a democracy this is? Liberty, and now they're running ads on television about the Constitution that gives us our great liberties. And once the apparatus of power is in the hands of the Brotherhood, all opposition, all contrary opinions must be extinguished by death. Democracy is but a tool to be used and afterwards broken. Liberty, but a sentimental folly unworthy of the logician. So liberty and democracy that they keep crying today is nothing but a tool to gain power over the whole world and to use the liberty of this country and the freedom of speech, freedom of movement in order to overthrow governments of this world. And after this is done and all power is in the hands of the Brotherhood, then democracy and liberty will be smashed to the ground. I'll go on with his quote. "The absolute rule of the self-chosen priesthood, according to the dogmas it has learned by rote, is to be imposed upon mankind without mitigation, progressively forever." So this satanic system, Luciferian worship, is to be imposed upon man, and the grip tightened and tightened until no one will ever speak out against it. I'll finish his quote. "All this set out in prosy textbooks, written also in the blood of history of several powerful nations. It is the communist faith and purpose." End of quote. Winston Churchill. He stumbled across the Brotherhood. Now, the night Mike Warnke was initiated as high priest into witchcraft or Satanism, he was given the special handshake with the little and index fingers extended. When you go and look at the special handshake of the Master Mason, it's identical. Witchcraft, Satanism, and the secret special handshake of the Master Mason are exact. No different. After his initiation was over, a big party was thrown in honor of Mike Warnke becoming a high priest in Satanism. Some very big, high-up people were there, very cultured, sophisticated. He could tell they had not come out of the colleges and high schools, and they weren't in the hippie movement. Some were women, very, very sophisticated. Whispers were that those high-ups formed yet another step that was secret to most, and they suspicioned that it was a fourth step. And they thought the name of it was the Illuminati, which means bearer of the light or light bringer. That's the meaning of Lucifer. But the code of silence made it impossible for them on the third level to be sure whether there was a fourth level or not. Now, Mike Warnke was ready to hold the coven meetings for the Satanists. He had only one concern in his mind as he began to go to the various coven meetings as high priest. That was, how could he call up these demonic spirits, and they recognized they are demons, properly, so that they would do exactly what he stated. And the reason why is that he didn't want to make a mistake, and I'll quote this from his book once again, page 75. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. Here's why. I had already read one case where two jokers had been fooling around and had stood in the wrong part of the circle, the big circle, with their toes on the pentagram, and the demons crushed them to death. Their rib cages had caved in like balsa wood under an elephant's foot. Exactly the same thing had happened to both of them. They were twins in death. So Mike Warnke did not want to make a mistake because he knew demons hate human beings. And unless you use the exact incantation of Satanism and demonism, the demons will turn upon you. Now, he also was required to do the drawing of the pentagram on the nude woman's stomach every meeting. So he would draw the pentagram. I want to hold up a little book now for everyone to see. I'll turn to the introductory part. The title of this book is General Grand Chapter, Order of the Eastern Star, Freemasonry. Right on the inside cover is a pentagram. Right on the inside cover. This is Masonry, not witchcraft, not Satanism. Or is it? Sure it is. And yet people don't even know it. This little small book, I'll turn it back around for the camera in a second, was first copyrighted in 1859, then 1914, then 1929. Now what I want to show you is they have whole pages of the inverted star, the pentagram, and they have certain signs inside the pentagrams that have different meanings. And yet the meanings are never explained to the women in the Eastern Star of Masonry. Throughout this book, there are hundreds of pentagrams and then triangles, which also is a part of the New Age movement and Luciferian and Satanism. So, right here, the pentagram is one of the signs of the Masonic Lodge. And in men's Masonry, they have in it, in the high echelons, they have inside the circle and the five-pointed star, the goat's head of Mendes, which is Satan. Now, listen to what Mike Warnke says about demons. Most of us have never seen a demon We've never confronted a demon, but there is a member of our local congregation who was raised as a Catholic, their whole family. Many times as they would be sitting in their home, things would float across the room. No one carrying them. Then the sister of our church member, her husband, would not believe that there are such things as spirits and demons. One night, her and her husband was sitting in bed. All of a sudden, something just materialized right in front of them, right at the foot of their bed. And they both looked up. He jumped out of bed because it turned around, went out of the room, and headed toward the living room. He jumped out of the room, went through the door, and by the time he got, it just evaporated right before their eyes. He now is a believer in demons. He doesn't know what they are, why they're there, what their purpose is. But Mike Warnke knows, and he's going to tell us a little about demons for those of us who don't believe they exist. Page 76. I did not want my first meeting to end that way, by being crushed to death by a demon. I went around practicing the words I was supposed to use to get the demon back where it belongs, inside the circle. I also had to make sure the pentagram was freshly painted on the altar stone every week, so that there would be no break in the lines forming it. If there was a break, a demon could get out, becoming a wild and unfettered demon. That would be dangerous. As I started the ritual for raising a demon, as I had seen Dean, that was the former high priest, do so many times, the thought went through my mind that most people outside of witchcraft and Satan worship do not even believe in demons. So many people refuse to believe until they see or feel something for themselves. By the time our ceremony was over, any skeptic who could have viewed it would have been a wholehearted believer. I was proud of myself for pulling it off without a hitch. As members of the Brotherhood, we probably understood demons better than most people because we use them to accomplish our evil deeds. Demons are Satan's helpers, fallen angels who were expelled with him from heaven. He got it right. They are an invisible presence. You cannot see them, but you soon know they're there. There are legions of demons. No one knows how many, perhaps more demonologists could name all the commanders of some legions of demons, but the rank and file outnumber people. In other words, demons have leaders. Satan is super organized, and there may be a leader and 2,000 demons have to do what he says. He goes on. The demons have to do what they are commanded, but they're like rebellious children. They resent their obligation to serve you. You know how to. You have to know the proper way to safely unleash a demon, for they'll stomp on you, to put it mildly, if you leave out any of the safety measures. In our ceremonies, we called on demons to do almost everything a person's satanic-oriented mind could dream up. We had control of a satanic power, although often demons themselves do their own destructive deeds without our directing them. Notice what he says demons can do. All of these things. He called up demons through the pentagram and the proper incantations and his submissiveness to Satan that caused all of the following things that he lists. Demons can inflict disease. Demons can possess men. Demons can possess animals. They can oppose spiritual growth. You wonder sometimes why you're not growing spiritually? Demons are opposing it. They can disseminate false doctrine. Demons can torment people. Demons can talk or cry with a loud voice, using the tongue and lips of humans. And if any of you saw on the news network several months ago, a woman out into the state of Oregon or Washington, she was what they call a channeler. And here was this spirit inside of her, said he was thousands of years old. And it was a man's voice, using her lips and her tongue to speak. And then when there was no channeling going on, her voice was a woman's voice. Oh yes, these things are real. He says that demons can tell lies and make people believe lies. So demons can both tell lies and make people believe those lies. They can even preach. He knows. They infiltrated churches to destroy them. He says demons can stand, walk, and seek rest when embodied in a human being. They can tell fortunes. See, they can tell fortunes and make it happen. And therefore they can seduce you into believing, hey, they're right. I'm going after this God. They can make people strip off their clothes. He said he did it. They can cause suicides. And what about some suits now of hard rock acid singers who promoted songs about suicide? And 2 lawsuits are in the courts right now because sons of these people committed suicide after listening to these songs. And these songs had what is called backmasking, subliminal messages. Commit suicide. Go ahead, do it. Demons can put these things into your mind. Demons can render a person insane. Go down to 5400 Arsenal Street in St. Louis, Missouri. They have bars on the windows there, and people are behind lock and key and cannot get out. They butt their heads against walls. They foam at the mouth. They scream at the top of their lungs, but they never say an intelligent word. Demon possession. They can cause a body to be bowed or bowed in affliction by afflicting it. Remember in the scriptures, there was a woman who had been bent over for 18 years, or I forget how many years, all because of a demon. They can cause, listen to this, jealousy, pride, and lust. They can drive a person into despair. Are we waging spiritual warfare against them? Or do we give in to all of these things and not even realize what's happening to us? He went on to show on page 77 of his books, demons seek to inhabit human bodies that they might work out their indescribable lust and evil longings. They will not willingly leave a human that they inhabit. That's why Jesus said some were so stubborn that they won't go out except by much prayer and fasting. Because they are so rebellious, they don't want to leave that warm, moist human body. If cast out, he said, they'll seek to re-enter the same body and inviting other demons to join him. He said that he personally had known of one person who had as many as 2,000 demons that inhabited that one man. Is demonism real? This is a man who was in it up to his eyeballs. High priest of Satanism well, I'll get into that in a minute. I won't get ahead of myself. Then Mike Warnke said that the reason why you and I never hear that much about it was because they always have the police on their side. They said that they have at least one policeman in every force in the country who is paid off to protect them or who is a member of witchcraft and Satanism itself. On 2020 television with Hugh Downs, they showed months and months ago how that it has been discovered in all 50 states. Satanism, ritualistic killing of animals with a pentagram inscrawled on the ground with a finger. They have found animals with the blood drained. And in some cases found the jars with the blood still there, where somebody approached them before they could continue their rituals. They said that they have absolute proof, but the police departments don't want to accept it as being Satanism, that this is what's happening to many of the children who disappear from the streets. Geraldo has had on his program on ABC television about Satanism, and he's had former witches there verifying everything this man said in his book and everything that I'm relaying to you today. Mike stated that he had called up a demon to burn down a building one time just to show a friend of his the power that he had. Then they drove on down the street, and as they came back by, because he was trying to get this person to come into Satanism, as they came back by, the ambulances were there, the fire trucks were there, and the building was burned to the ground. He did nothing but summons a demon, instructed what to do, went on his merry way, came back, and the building was burned down. He called upon demons to afflict a professor at the college that he had gone to, who was discovering what was going on and was going to spill the beans on them. So he told the professor that he would send a demon to work on his children. And he did. When he afflicted the children, the professor shut his mouth. The demons acted. There was no telling of what really happened. No exposure of Satanism. Now, in performing the rituals, he finally required the coven members who sat around the circle to begin to drink each other's blood. They would cut their wrists just like he had done and drain some of the blood and pass it around. They began to sacrifice the last joint on one of their fingers. They would cut it off right on the spot. Then they would pass it around the circle, and each person would eat part of the flesh of their own finger. This is Satanism. And remember, this is only the third step. There is yet another step above it that he knew of for an absolute fact. He said they had an infiltrator who belonged to the local Catholic Church. And he was a high school student. And he actually went through some of the rituals with a priest. And he had access to what they called their holy water. I knew a man in St. Louis, Missouri, who used to make the Catholic Church's holy water here in town. So there's nothing holy about it. You just take all the chemicals out of it, and you've got distilled water. It's called holy water. So anyway, they would steal the holy water and urinate in it, and then pass it around, drip some of the blood in it, and drink it. This is a part of their rituals in Satanism. Those of the fourth stage suspected that there was something else called the Illuminati above them. Those who were approved, those above him, who approved greatly of his leadership, of his coven, began to talk to him about even yet further advancement in this organization. The reason why that they were calling upon him to even advance further is because they began to sacrifice animals to Satan. They finally began to kidnap teenage girls because they had what was called in one of their rituals the unwilling virgin. They would kidnap young girls anywhere from 13 to 19 who were virgins. They would make sure they knew that first by sending an informer or an infiltrator to get to know the person. Then they would make sure this girl had never had sexual relationships. They would kidnap her and take her and place her on the altar to Lord Satan. Then all the men would ritualistically rape her. And she was an unwilling virgin. And then, right before her eyes, they would call up a demon So that by the time that they were through with her, she would never go home and tell the police. They would never tell her parents because she was afraid that a demon would come and kill her. So once again, silent in witchcraft and demonism. Now, one of the high-ups in the fourth stage said that she would send Mike a message concerning the Brotherhood's business. And one evening, as he sat in bed, he was studying his books on witchcraft, spiritism. He was sitting there, or this was in the living room, not in the bed. He was sitting there studying. His door was absolutely locked and bolted shut. He had to because he was a drug runner. Witchcraft runs drugs. They're in it big time. So as he was sitting there in the middle of the living room, suddenly a woman appeared, materialized right before his eye. She couldn't come through the door. It was bolted. He lived in an apartment. She couldn't have climbed up. She stood there and he said she was a very beautiful woman. And she gave a message and stated, this is the message from so-and-so. And then right before his eyes, she dematerialized. She was gone. Demons. Now do we understand how those in the higher echelon can send messages anywhere in the world about their global plans? All they do is summons up a demon, send it, give the message somewhere else in the world. Oh yes. He came to the conclusion that there were fourth stagers and that it was true that there was such a thing as the Illuminati. He was invited to go to meetings, very wealthy homes up in the eastern part of the United States, right on the coast in Maine and Massachusetts. Women and men who were very well bred. They were college educated in places like Yale, Princeton, Columbia. These were the ones who controlled completely and thoroughly the upper echelon called the Illuminati. Now I want to quote, this will be my last quote from his book today, page 100 and parts of 101 of his book, The Satan Seller. Here's what he said. My eyes were finally opened to the enormity and effectiveness of the Satan movement. I was now aware of the fact that I was part of a deep and widespread organization operating not only in the United States, but all over the world. The word Illuminati was whispered around here too, though it was still the wispiest of references. They couldn't prove that it exists except for those people who were nameless, who came in among them, well-bred, well-educated, to teach them strategy for making their covens better and more effective. Then he went on to say, was it indeed the fourth stage, the next higher level of Satan's superiors? And suddenly an idea burst, full-formed into my mind, like a blast of light. Could there possibly be a fifth stage that even fourth stagers scarcely knew about and were forbidden to mention? And yes, there is. There are various levels until finally you get to the Council of 300, the 300 wealthiest individuals on the continent of Europe. And then you come down to the Council of 13. And above that is the worldwide warlock, or the male witch counterpart. He went on to say, a worldwide, super secret, controlled group with perhaps as few as a dozen at the very top, with key men controlling governments, economics, armies, food supplies, pulling the strings of every major international event. And not just now, but for generations, centuries, since the beginning of civilization, manipulating men by their egos and their appetites, means sexual appetites, rewarding them for obedience and depriving them for disobedience. I know of another man who was in the Masonic Lodge. He was very obedient to everything they said. Upon his verbal agreement that he would pay back a loan, he was given $1 million and built a super store up in New England with a bowling alley in the basement. And his wife got religion, Christianity. And it wasn't long till they punished him and bankrupted him for it, because his wife accepted Jesus Christ. He went on to say that they raise up first one side, the government, against another one that is not cooperating, then the other government, maintaining a balance of frustration. Isn't that the way it is all over the world today, with international communism pitted against free America? Frustration on every continent because of the threat of nuclear annihilation. Then he said, something else went through his mind. They did it through a satanic knowledge of all the sinners of the self. In other words, Satan knows how God made men and women, and he exploits that and uses it against people to entangle them in his system. Self-love. All people do that is in the Illuminati, witchcraft, and so on, is love themselves and nobody else. They couldn't care less about anybody else. He said indulgence. They use the indulgences in the flesh against them. The pride and of superiority, thinking you're superior to other people. Then pride. And he says they gently nudge the most ambitious, those that are filled with the most self-love, indulgence, think they're superior to everybody else, and the most ambitious, promising them power. When you look at these men that now control the government of the United States, think about it for a minute and see if you can't look back and remember. When you see these men, don't every one of them look very self-assured? Don't they nearly look alike? Comb their hair alike? All have dark hair, parted just alike, have the same posture. Every one of them are in Satan's army. Every one of them. You look from now on when you see them on television. Every one of them look just alike, talk alike, act alike. All of them. Satan has power. You either conform to his system or else death awaits you, or humiliation if you survive. Then he said the ultimate that everyone was looking for was lust. Lust to become the elitist person on the face of the earth. Then he came to the final conclusion that there is indeed a global network of Satanism, and the first three stages are nothing but what calls people out, and then they are selected to go into the fourth stage. They're sophisticated, they're sent to colleges, they're directed in the proper direction to control Satan's government. Brethren, the Illuminati is the high-ranking portion of that government. But I've got a question. If these men, all of these men that are in the Illuminati, what is their goal but world government? But then, if they have this goal, what in the world is Satan's goal? Surely Satan wants more than simply the capability of running the government today. I mean, after all, if you were only going to run the world today, what pleasure is that for a spirit being that has existed for a long period of time? No, Satan has the ultimate appetite. Satan, the devil, wants universal control. Not just the control of the United States, the Soviet Empire, not just the control of planet Earth. Look what it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1 to 15. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto Him, that you be not soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit. And we've just been talking about demons and how they can conjure them up. They literally appear. Remember, you read Hebrews 1 and 2, and you'll find out angels were created to be ministering spirits. The good angels minister to us, but the bad angels, the demons, minister to Satan and his sworn servants. Nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand. Christ hadn't returned yet. Let no man deceive you by any means. Or I can say, spirit deceive you either. That day should not come except there come a falling away first. When you fall away from something, that's falling away from truth. You can't fall away from error. You fall away from truth. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So here is an individual at the very end of the age that's going into the temple of God, that's going to be reinstituted in the Middle East. He's going to claim to be God. The whole world is going to worship him. This is when the falling away is going to occur. The great falling away. All mankind will be deceived except the very elect. Remember you not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? Verse 8 or 6. And now you know what withholds that he might be revealed in his time. God's plan was not ready yet. Verse 7. For the mystery of iniquity, that's lawlessness, and it is a mystery that Satan has a super organization of government, and he rules secretly every government on the face of the earth. He controls in secret every religion in the world except the one and only true religion of Jesus Christ that obeys Him. All others He controls. Only who now lets will let until he be taken out of the way. Verse 8. And then shall that wicked, and the actual Greek is wicked one, meaning Satan the devil, be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. The fate of Satan the devil is the lake of fire. Read Matthew 25:41. He's going to be destroyed completely and totally after he's been loosed for a short period at the end of the 1,000 years. Verse 9. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. So Satan, just like he was behind the king of Tyre, is going to be behind this end-time government. This human being. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. The actual Greek phrase should say are perishing. They aren't perished yet, but they are in the process if they never repent. Because they receive not the love of the truth that they might be saved. And for this cause, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie. See, there is the truth, the one and only truth. You cannot get it just out of any church out there today. You can't do it. It's found in the Bible. And any doctrine a church preaches that is not correct by this Bible, it is wrong and it is controlled by the deception of Satan. The people don't know it, but Satan knows it. Verse 12. That they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you. Brethren, this is my conclusion right now. The next 3 verses. Satan's going to be revealed. His system is going to be revealed, but after Jesus comes. Brethren, beloved of the Lord, you are beloved of God the Father and Jesus Christ if you have repented of breaking His laws. You now are subject to the law of the kingdom. You've accepted the shed blood of Jesus Christ. All of your sins have been forgiven. Now to remain justified, we obey God. And you cannot earn salvation. That is just the least you can do to remain in a justified state. Because God has from the beginning chosen you to salvation. We should all be jumping for joy, thinking that for some reason God has had mercy upon us, because if it were not for His mercy, we would still be out there. Through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. See, the churches have it backwards. They say grace, therefore you don't have to do anything anymore. Right here it says we are sanctified, set apart for holy use by the Spirit and belief of the truth. And when you believe something, you act upon it. Verse 14, whereunto He called you by our gospel, to the obtaining of the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, brethren, I'm going to admonish you with the Apostle Paul's words, because I know some of you, my brethren, the brethren of Jesus Christ, I baptized many of you with my own hands. Some of you are having problems in the flesh. You don't want to submit totally. It is fighting you. It's nearly killing you to go back into the world and to do those things that are not good. Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which you have been taught. Those traditions are God's 10 commandments, His holy days, fighting the flesh and putting to death all the works of the flesh in Galatians 5. And putting on the works of the Spirit, the fruit of the Spirit, which by word, whether by word or by epistle. So if I admonish you from the pulpit, brethren, or whether it is by one of our pieces of literature, I admonish you to hold fast to those things which you have absolutely proven. Because Satan has two types of people. One, those who are ignorant and disobey God, and he's got them. They're deceived. Then he's got a second type. Those who deliberately worship Lucifer to receive power, prestige, and to rule and control the world. They are deliberate Satanists. Brethren, don't you go away out into the world and be deceived into Satan's ways ever again.